Your Honor, just to forewarn the court, we may be wanting you to go to Input 1, to hook up the computer to.
I'll be ready.
I hope so. So how we doing on the mic?
Fine.
Lean into it.
Sorry.
Alright, talk loud. Okay. Now, you're a full-time student at a college as a freshman, correct?
Yes.
And you have a job.
Yes, I work full-time.
Now, let's go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
Alright, and let's go back to the year of 1999.
Okay.
Okay, where did you go to school then?
It was either 8th grade or the beginning of freshman year in high school.
And let's talk about the 8th grade in 1999. Alright, where did you go to the 8th grade? What school?
Hollywood Middle School.
Then you went to high school as a freshman in the same year, 99.
Uh-huh.
You have to say, yes or no.
Yes.
And what high school did you go to?
I went to Hollywood High School.
Where were you living at this time?
In East LA.
How is it that you ended up at Hollywood High School when you lived in East Los Angeles?
The school bus would come pick me up because I was a magnet student.
Could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a magnet student means?
You have to have good grades. And they have, like, special extracurricular activities.
And what particular extracurricular activities were you involved in?
Performing arts.
And were you doing that as like what aspect of that?
Like fixing the stage and stuff like that.
So you were the technical person, huh?
Yeah.
You weren't the performer.
No.
Now, how long were you at Hollywood High?
For about 2 years.
So it would be through your freshman and sophomore years.
Yes.
Now, during the time that you were at Hollywood High, during your time that you were there, where were you living? Specifically, what address?
It was on Soto Street. It was a bachelor's apartment.
Could you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the size of the interior of this apartment was?
About from here to that other wall. It wasn't very big at all.
From here, do you mean from the railing of the jury box?
Yeah.
To the far wall of the courtroom?
No, the end of that wall.
Where the sign says, Lorna Frey.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to get you on the record. Laughter. Now, how many people were living in this apartment or?
At the beginning, 5.
5. And who would that be?
My father, my mother, and me and my brothers.
Alright, let's go back. Your father's name is?
David.
And his last name?
Arvizo.
And your mother's first name?
Janet.
And your brother's first name?
Gavin.
Is Gavin younger or older than you?
He's younger.
And do you have another brother?
Yes.
And that brother's name?
Star.
And is he younger or older than Gavin?
He's younger.
And you now have another brother, is that correct?
Yes.
And his name is?
Jet.
And how old is Jet?
He's 7 months.
So at that time, there were the 5 of you living in this apartment.
Uh-huh, yes.
Now, during the sometime in 2000, did something happen with regard to one or more of your brothers?
Yes. Gavin was diagnosed with cancer.
Do you remember approximately when that was?
Before I was a freshman in high school. During the summer of 8th grade.
Now, what happened when Gavin was diagnosed with cancer? Where did they have to take him somewhere for treatment or?
Yeah, he would go to Kaiser Hospital.
Did you ever go with him to the hospital?
I would visit him once in a while. As much as I could. Because I was in school at that time, too.
At some point, at this time, the family unit, your father, your mother and your brothers, are still living with you, is that correct?
Yes.
All together?
Yes.
Now, when Gavin was in the hospital, okay. To your knowledge, did Gavin know at that time a person by the name of Jaime Masada?
Yes. We already knew him before then.
Alright. Now, could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how you knew Jaime Masada?
In the summer of 1999 we were in a comedy camp.
Okay.
At his club.
Do you know the name of the club?
The Laugh Factory.
And you say, we were, who was in the camp?
Me and my brothers.
And you met Mr. Masada at that time?
Yes.
Did you meet any other people, comedians, at that time?
Yeah. Every time we had a meeting, a new star would come and just teach us little techniques and stuff.
And who were some of the people that came to that camp?
Fritz. Paul Rodriguez. One of the Sean Wayans went. George Lopez. That's all I can remember right now.
Okay. I'm going to show you a photograph.
May I see what that is?
I'll bring it over.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, I have a photograph that's been pre-marked as number 28 for identification purposes. Miss Arvizo, do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And who is that?
Jaime Masada.
Is that an accurate representation of Mr. Masada?
Yes.
Move it be admitted, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Display that for the jury, if you could.
Just show the jury.
No, we're going to do it up here. Can you see that, Miss Arvizo?
Yes.
Is that Jaime Masada?
Yes.
And this is the person from the Laugh Factory?
Yes.
Okay. Did I hear you say something about somebody named Fritz?
Yes.
Who is that?
He's the weather guy from Channel 4.
You met him at this camp?
Yes, he did host in one of the little classes.
Your Honor, I have an exhibit marked as People's 13 for identification purposes. And I'm showing it to counsel.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you People's 13 for identification. Go ahead, you can grab it. I'm sorry, excuse my bad manners.
That's okay.
Now, with regard to that particular photograph, do you recognize the individuals in that photograph?
Yes.
And is that an accurate depiction of the people in that photograph?
Like accurate how?
Is that the way you looked?
Looked back then.
Back then. That's the way Mr. Coleman looked.
Yes.
All right. Move that be admitted, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Now, the person on the far left of the photograph, who's that?
That's me.
How old were you when this was taken?
About 13.
And the person just below you with your hands on their shoulder?
That's Star.
And that's your brother?
Uh-huh, yes.
And do you recognize the person in the middle?
Yes.
Who's that?
Fritz.
And the person with his arm on Fritz's shoulder, who's that?
That's Gavin.
Okay. And do you recall when this was taken?
Yeah, that was during the comedy camp.
All right. Go ahead and put the lights back on, Your Honor. Now, you told the ladies and gentlemen that your brother was sick, that he had been diagnosed with cancer.
Uh-huh.
Now, to your knowledge, did you know about any of his wishes to meet certain people while he was in the hospital?
Yes.
And do you recall the names of any of the people that he wanted to meet?
Yes.
Who were they?
He gave a list to Jaime Masada. It was Chris Tucker, Adam Sandler, and Mr. Jackson.
To your knowledge, did he meet those people?
He met two of them, yes.
Which two?
Mr. Jackson and Chris Tucker.
And have you ever been with Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
Lots of occasions.
Did he kind of become a friend of the family?
Yes.
Now, with regard to your brother and Mr. Jackson, do you know of your own personal knowledge whether there were any contacts, when the first contacts between your brother and Mr. Jackson occurred?
It was on a telephone call. He called Kaiser.
Objection. Foundation. Hearsay.
Sustained.
Were you present when that conversation occurred?
No, I wasn't.
So you heard about it from somebody else?
Gavin had told me when I got there later on.
Objection. Hearsay.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Stricken.
Were you ever present at your grandparents' house when Mr. Jackson called?
Yes.
And were you present during the conversation?
No.
But you were at the house?
Yes.
Was there a point in time when you and your family went to Neverland Valley Ranch?
Yes.
And do you remember approximately when that was?
It was at the beginning of Gavin's cancer, so around 2000.
Were you in school at that time?
Yes. I think so. I don't remember. I had to be in school, yeah.
Do you remember who all went to the ranch?
It was me, my father, and my brothers and my mom.
And do you recall how you got to the ranch?
A limo came and picked us up.
And where did they pick you up?
At the Soto apartment.
Do you remember what day of the week it was that they picked you up?
No.
Now, when you got to the ranch, could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as the limousine got onto the ranch and up to the main residence, what happened?
We were greeted by the cooks. And then we were brought into like the dining room area, like it's right in front of the kitchen area, and then Mr. Jackson came and greeted us.
Did you spend the night?
Yes, we did.
Where did you spend the night?
In one of the guest rooms.
And do you know where your brothers spent the night?
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained. Actually, I'll allow her to answer that, yes or no, as part of the foundation.
Thank you. Do you know where your brothers stayed?
Yes.
At least the first night.
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever in their room?
With them? No.
Did you go? Not did you sleep there, but did you ever go into their room?
No.
Were your parents? Do you know where your parents stayed that night?
Yes.
Did you go into your parents' room?
Yes.
And where did your parents stay that night?
They stayed in another guest room.
And where was that guest room in relationship to where you stayed?
Right next to mine. Well, kind of towards the back area, facing the lake.
Facing the lake.
Uh-huh.
And you were in the front of that?
Yeah.
During the time that you were at Neverland, when you first got there, after you were greeted by Mr. Jackson, by the way, do you recognize Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Can the record so indicate that, Your Honor?
Yes.
When you were greeted by Mr. Jackson, after that, what did you do? What did you do?
Just went out and went to the arcade and drove around the little carts.
Did you do that by yourself?
Yeah.
Was there anybody else with you?
Well, during that visit, me and my parents would go out and, occasionally, but I was mainly by myself.
And where did you drive in the carts?
Towards the movie theater and to the zoo and stuff.
You're going to have to lean into it.
Towards the movie theater and the zoo.
So you just took a tour.
Uh-huh.
Now, during the time that you were there, was there ever an incident that occurred between your mother and your father?
Yes.
Were you present?
Yes.
Who else was present?
Star was.
Tell us what happened. And let me ask you this. Let's go back just a second, if we can. Do you remember about what time it was when you arrived at Mr. Jackson's Neverland Valley Ranch on the first occasion when you arrived there?
It was daytime. I don't know when.
Do you remember what time it was in relationship to dinner?
Oh, it was far from dinner.
So it was in the afternoon hours.
Uh-huh.
Did you go to school that day? Do you recall?
I don't think so.
So the incident that I'm about to ask you to describe, did that occur on that day or another day?
I think it was another day.
Do you recall when it was in relationship to when you first got there? Like was it the next day, or the next day, or what?
Probably the next or a couple days after.
What happened?
Objection. Hearsay. And vague.
Judge, I already laid the foundation that she was there and she was in the room.
The objection is overruled.
What happened?
My parents were arguing back and forth, and my dad threw a soda can at my mom.
And what happened after he threw the can at her?
He ran, walked, stormed out of the room.
And what was your mother's reaction?
She just started crying.
Objection. Hearsay.
Overruled. The answer is, she started crying.
Now, during the time that you were living with your father and your mother and your brothers at the Soto Street residence, did you ever see your father strike your mother?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
Too many to count. So many.
Did he ever strike you?
Yes.
How about your brothers?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
Lots.
Has your mother ever struck you?
Never.
Now, when you were at the ranch, go back to the ranch for just a second. You were at the ranch, and you're visiting. Do you know, were you present during a conversation, at any time while you were on the ranch, concerning whether or not the boys would stay with Mr. Jackson in his bedroom?
Objection. Hearsay. Foundation.
I haven't asked for the.
All right, you may answer that, yes or no. The objection is overruled.
What was the question again?
I'll have the court reporter read it to you.
And leading, Your Honor.
Overruled. Record read.
Yes.
And where did that conversation take place?
In the main dining room.
And who was present when the conversation took place?
Me, my father, my brothers and Mr. Jackson.
And what was going on at the time that it took place?
We were eating.
Who brought up the subject?
Gavin did.
Objection. Hearsay.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, I don't think we heard your answer. Who brought it up?
Gavin.
Gavin did.
Uh-huh.
In response to his request.
Objection. Misstates the evidence. Leading. Hearsay.
I haven't even finished the question yet.
But I think you caught yourself.
No,
I'll sustain the objection as leading. It's
as a result of the conversation that particular night, do you know, of your own personal knowledge, where your brother slept?
Yes.
Where?
Objection. Foundation. Hearsay. Relevance.
foundation. Sustained.
With regard to your, I asked you of your own personal knowledge.
Yes.
And what was that based on?
Gavin telling me, well, no.
Objection. Hearsay. Move to strike.
I'll rephrase it this way, Judge. As a result of the conversation that, without telling us what was said, as a result of the conversation that occurred at the dinner table, did your brothers sleep in the guest room that night?
No.
Now, after this visit to Neverland Valley Ranch that you've described to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to your knowledge, only based on your knowledge, when was the next time that you went back to the ranch?
Not for a while. The next time I went was with Chris.
Chris who?
Tucker.
Now, let me see if I can put that in relationship to something. Do you remember a time? Can you tell us whether or not you ever visited the ranch in conjunction with a filming?
Yes.
Now, was the time that you went to the ranch with Mr. Tucker before or after that?
Before.
And do you recall approximately how long before that?
A while. Months.
A couple of months. It's the same year, or a different year?
Pretty close, I think.
How many different times did you go to the ranch with Mr. Tucker?
2.
Was the defendant, Mr. Jackson, present during the times you went to the ranch?
No.
Was he present during the time that you went there for the Bashir filming?
Yes.
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled.
Now, the time that you went to the ranch with your mother and your father and your brothers, that was the first time you went, correct?
Yes.
The one you described to the jury.
Yes.
The times that you went to the ranch with Mr. Tucker that you've described.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury whether or not your mother went with you on those occasions?
She didn't.
On the occasion of when you went there for the Bashir filming, was your mother with you?
No.
Between the time that you went to the ranch on the very first time that you've described to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the incident involving your mother and father, let's put it that way, until the time you went back with Chris Tucker, do you know, of your own personal knowledge, whether your brother and your father went back to the ranch?
Yes.
Do you know how many times?
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
Quite a bit of times. I don't know exactly how many times.
Did your mother, to your knowledge, ever go with them?
No.
Now, during the time that your brother Gavin was hospitalized with cancer, okay. We're going to start talking about that now.
Okay.
Did you ever attend, to your knowledge, were there ever efforts to raise money to help the family offset some of the expenses for the?
The only one I know about was a benefit at the Laugh Factory.
Okay. And did you go to that?
Yes, I did.
And who else went to it from your family?
My father, my 2 brothers.
Did your mother go?
No.
And do you know who was sponsoring the benefit?
Jaime, Masada or Chris. It was like a graduation of other like little kids, like we did.
So that was a graduation ceremony.
Yeah.
And you said Mr. Masada. I heard you say Chris. Chris who?
Chris Tucker. He was there also, but I don't know whether he was sponsoring it or not.
And you were present at that particular benefit?
Yes.
During the time that your brother was undergoing his treatments for cancer, was it required for the family to make some adjustments in the living conditions for your brother?
Yes.
And where was he living during that time?
He was living with my grandmother.
And could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what adjustments had to be made?
They had to be very, very clean, no dust. It had to be very cool. He couldn't be in hot conditions or he would either go into a seizure or he would pass out. He was very, very delicate.
All right. Were there any special things that had to be purchased or changes made in the room in which Gavin stayed at your grandmother and grandfather's?
Yes.
Could you describe that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
In that room, the carpet was totally torn out, and they put linoleum down. Because his bones, they ache a lot. And then my mom bought an orthopedic type bed. And then all the walls were repainted. They bought an air conditioning. Like a little unit, tore a hole through that wall, so the bad heat would go out through the air conditioning.
Were there any sort of little treats that were bought for Gavin during this time?
Yeah, his.
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, because we constantly wanted to make him very happy because of the things that the doctors were telling us. So my mom bought him a TV, a DVD player, a stereo. That's all I remember right now.
Now, the things that you just described, what room in the house were those items located?
In one of the bedrooms in my grandmother's house.
The one that Gavin occupied?
Yes.
And with regard to this TV that was in the room that Gavin was in, how big was this TV?
About 25 inches or so. It was only about. The screen's only about that big.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to show counsel some more photographs. The first photograph I'm going to show you is People's 14. Your Honor, would it be all right for me to stay here to lay the foundation and then go back to ask the questions?
All right.
Do you recognize the people depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Is that an accurate representation of those individuals as they were at that point of time?
Yes.
We'll go through who they are in just a second. I'm going to show you a photograph marked as Exhibit 199. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Do you recognize the people depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Is that an accurate representation of those people at that particular point in time?
Yes.
And with regard to exhibit number 49, ask if you recognize the people depicted in that photograph.
Yes.
Is that photograph an accurate representation of those people at that point in time?
Yes.
And lastly, I'm going to show you a photograph marked as 337 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of how those individuals looked in that photograph at that particular point in time?
Yes.
All right. Now, if you could just go back and put them. Yeah, that's good. All right. Move they be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
They're admitted.
All right. And we're going to use the display again, Your Honor, with the court's permission. Miss Arvizo, do you recognize the people depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Who are the people in that photograph?
Me, Star, Gavin, Chris, and the baby, Dustin. And Asia.
And do you recall?
It's back on.
Give us the exhibit number that's being shown to the jury.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. This would be exhibit number 14, Your Honor. I think I was about to ask you, do you recall when this particular photograph was taken?
Yes.
And where were you?
We were at Chris Tucker's older brother's wedding.
So he invited you to a wedding with him?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately what year was it?
I don't remember.
Do you remember what grade in school you were in?
I know I was still in high school, but I don't remember.
Alright, now I'm going to ask you to pick up the exhibit that has the number 199 on it.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recognize the people depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And with regard to the person in the upper left-hand side with the blue shirt on, who's that?
That's Star.
And the person that has the little visor? I don't need this, Your Honor.
They're on their way, Judge. Should I turn it back on?
With regard to the person with the little visor on that says, Raiders, who is that?
That's Gavin.
And from the photograph, can you tell whether or not this was taken during the time that he was having this battle with cancer?
Yes.
And of course I think we all recognize the person with his arm draped around him, is that right?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Kobe Bryant.
And that jersey that's depicted on the table there, did Gavin end up getting that jersey and wearing it?
Yes.
Alright, now, if you could pick up the photograph marked as 49 for us, if you would. Do you have that?
Yes.
Alright, okay. Now, who are the people in that photograph?
Me, Gavin, Star, and Louise.
Do you know Louise's last name?
Palanker.
And do you recall when this was taken?
This was during the comedy camp.
Is that when you first met her?
Yes.
Now, after you met Louise Palanker, did you stay friends with her?
Yes.
Could you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the nature of the relationship was between you and her, the family?
She would come over to our house. She was just very loving. Very sweet lady. She cared about us a lot.
When Gavin was diagnosed with cancer and during the time that he was being treated for cancer, was she still coming to see the family?
Yes.
Do you know about, during that period of time, how long it was that she was with you and the family? That's a bad question. That's a bad question. How often did she come to see Gavin?
Very often.
Would she come to the house?
Yes.
And you were there when she came?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, did she give money to your family?
Yes.
All right.
Do you want to just wait a minute?
I guess I can. I didn't know how long he was going to be, Your Honor. I guess we don't want his head popping up when I show the photographs.
My apologies.
Thank you, Peter.
Try it again. All right. Now, if you could take the next photograph, which I believe is marked as 337. Do you see that one in front of you?
Yes.
All right. Now, who is the person in the middle of that photograph?
That's Gavin.
And can you tell, who's the person over on the right-hand side?
That's Star.
Now, do you recognize the room in which this photograph is taken?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury what it is, what room it is?
It's the room that we fixed up for Gavin in my grandma's house.
And is that what Gavin looked like?
Yes.
Now, do you, of your own personal knowledge, know where the money came to fix that room up?
Yes.
Who?
Louise.
She gave you the money to do all that?
Yes.
Now, you talked about an air conditioning unit that had to be put in the room so that he wouldn't go into seizures. Do you see that air conditioning unit in that photograph?
Yes. It's right behind Star's head.
There's a little laser up there. Do you see that little black, long thing that looks like a pencil? Well, I guess it's not up there. Right there. Could you turn around to the exhibit that's been displayed on the board there? And this is exhibit 337. And can you point out the air unit you were talking about?
It's right there.
Okay. That's right behind Star's head. And as the Gavin appears to be seated on a bed.
Yes.
Is that the bed that you bought, or was that bed in there before?
No, that was the new bed.
All right. I think we can take the photograph down, Your Honor, and put the lights back on. Did you ever meet an individual by the name of Carol Lemire?
Yes.
Where did you meet her?
We met her at a dance studio.
Did you? How did that come about that you met her at the dance studio?
Well, we just started a dance. Well, we went to Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy's dance studio.
I couldn't get that, so I'm sure the jury didn't. Say it again.
We went to a dance studio. Mr. and Mrs. Dance Studio, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy's dance studio.
Was that before or after you had attended the comedy camp?
This is way before.
And you say, we. Who's, we?
Me and my brothers.
What kind of a dancing school was it?
Kind of everything, but mostly, like, tap was focused on.
Now, did you, as a result? Let me ask you this. Ms. Lemire, was she working there, or how did you meet her?
Her grandson was taking a class there.
So you met her through a mutual acquaintance.
Yes.
Did you ever stay with Miss Lemire?
Yes.
And when I say, stayed, where did you stay with her?
At her house.
And do you recall on how many occasions that was?
A couple, 3 maybe. I don't remember, but I would stay about a week or so.
And do you remember anything in particular about your stays with Mrs. Lemire?
They weren't that pleasant.
I'm sorry.
They weren't that pleasant.
Why?
Because I'd mostly clean and do stuff for her.
Now, was there a time when your mother and your father became separated?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately when that was?
That was during my sophomore year.
And during that year, do you remember about whether it was in the spring part of that year or the fall?
The beginning.
Now, when your father and your mother separated, where did you stay? Where did you live after that?
Me and my mom and my brother stood at the East LA apartment.
So he moved out.
Yes.
Do you remember what school you were in at the time your father left?
I was still in the Hollywood High School.
And so that would have been, how many years did you go to Hollywood High School?
2.
And that would have been what years? I mean, in terms of the 4 years.
2000. Or, 2001.
But is it like senior junior? Junior sophomore?
Well, when he left.
Well, how many years did you go to Hollywood High?
2.
Okay.
Freshman and sophomore.
Okay. That's what I was trying to get at. Now, after Hollywood High School, where did you go your junior year?
Roosevelt High School.
And how far is Roosevelt High School from the place where you lived at Soto Street?
3 lights. It's 4 blocks or so. It's not that far.
And how? This would have been your junior year now.
Yes.
And did you complete the whole junior year at Roosevelt?
Yes. Well, most of it. I finished my sophomore year there.
Alright, so you didn't complete 2 full years at Hollywood.
No, I left right before my sophomore year ended at Hollywood High School.
And then the next year, you took up at Roosevelt.
Yes.
And this would have been your junior year.
Yes.
Now, at the time that your father left, you folks still lived at Soto Street, correct?
Yes.
At the time that you went to school at Roosevelt, where did the family live?
We still lived at the East L apartment.
What's the address there, the street at least?
Yeah, the Soto Street apartment.
Let's just refer to it as the Soto Street apartment.
Okay.
So everybody knows what you're talking about when we talk about that. Okay.
Okay.
Now, during the time that you were living at the Soto Street apartment, during the summer, did you ever go to any academies?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to show you another picture.
Okay.
I think what I'll do, I'll save us some time here, Your Honor. Alright, I have 3 more photographs. And let's take these and put them up here out of the way, so we don't get them mixed up. And, first of all, let's just start with these 3.
Okay.
And I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. Do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of what she looks like?
Not right now.
Not right now. But I mean.
Not her hair.
Not her hair right now.
But, yes.
Okay. And the next person, the next photograph, which is 35.
What exhibits are you referring to?
I think I mentioned it was 31, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And the next one is 35. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And is that an accurate depiction of the person?
Yes.
Okay. And let's go to the next one, which is, move your hand back a little, 338. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of the people depicted in there?
Yes.
Move they be admitted into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
Alright, if we could have the lights down for just a second. And I want to direct your attention to the exhibit marked as 31 in evidence. No, not that one. I'm sorry, my fault. There, 31. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's my mommy.
It's your who?
Mommy.
You say she doesn't look like that now, because her hair, what's different?
Her hair is darker and shorter.
Other than that, it looks like your mom.
Yes.
Alright, the next one, let's go to 35. Alright, who's that?
That's David.
David who?
My father.
Alright, let's go to the next one. Alright, do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And what was the occasion for this particular photograph? Do you remember?
Just taking pictures of each other. And I had my explorer uniform on. So we just went and took pictures.
Okay. What? You say your explorer uniform on. What do you mean by that? What is an explorer?
I worked with the Los Angeles Police Department.
And how long did you work for them?
For about a year.
Did you have to go to some kind of training before you could work for the department?
Yes.
And what kind of training did you go to?
It was a little academy. It was about 12 Saturdays during the summer.
And then at the end, there's a
graduation.
And then you get a uniform.
Yeah.
Is that what you wore to work when you went to work?
Yeah.
What exhibit number is it?
338, Your Honor. Alright, you can take that photograph down, and we can get the lights back on, Your Honor. Now, you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that at some point in time you had gone to the ranch, Mr. Jackson's ranch, Neverland Valley Ranch. To your knowledge, did Mr. Jackson ever give the family any presents?
Yes.
Now, with regard to your going to the police academy, were any of those presents used in connection with that?
What do you mean?
Well, just what I said. Were there any things that Mr. Jackson gave you that were used in?
Yes.
What?
It was a white Bronco.
So Mr. Jackson gave you folks a car?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
That was during Gavin's cancer.
Do you remember when it was in relationship to the academy? How much before you started the academy?
How long did we keep it?
Let me go back and ask you another question. When you went to the Explorers Academy?
Yes.
Was this during the summer or was it during the school year?
It was during the summer.
And do you remember between what grades it was?
Freshman and sophomore, I think it was. Yeah, because I graduated in 2001. The academy was in August. It ended in August. I started it, I joined the Explorers in May. The academy ended in August.
And who took you to the academy on Saturdays?
My mom did.
And how did you get there?
We would take the white Bronco.
Do you know how long you'd had that Bronco before you started the academy?
It was given to Gavin like in the middle of his cancer, so like 6 months or so before that.
And do you know what happened to the Bronco?
It started stalling and started breaking down, and just wouldn't turn on anymore.
Okay. Did you keep it at the house?
Yes.
What happened to it after that?
Somebody came and picked it up and took it away.
Did you ever see it again?
No.
Now, were there other things that you did with Chris Tucker, other than going to the Neverland Valley Ranch with him?
Yes.
What other things did you do with Chris Tucker?
He took us to the Oakland game. We went.
Oakland.
Raiders game.
Okay.
And we would just go to his house. And sometimes I would go sleep over Aja's house.
Who is Asia?
That's Chris Tucker's fiancée.
Any other occasions you recall being places with Mr. Tucker?
Not that I remember right now.
At some point in time, you went back to the ranch on another occasion, is that correct?
Yes.
Other than the first one you've talked about?
Yes.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about that.
Objection. Vague.
Sustained.
Alright, do you recall approximately when it was you went back to the ranch?
About a year.
What time of the year was this, now?
I think it was during the summer. I really don't remember.
Okay. Let me ask you this, because that was probably a bad question on my part. When you went back to the ranch with regard to the Bashir filming that you've described to us.
Yes.
Do you remember when that was? What time of year was that?
That was in November. The Bashir taping.
Who went?
Me and my brothers.
And how did you get there?
A limo came and picked us up.
And when you got to the ranch, could you tell the jury, what was the first thing that happened after you got out of the limo?
We walked in the back entrance. Then Mr. Jackson came and met us.
All right. What part of the house were you in?
In the back of, right before you get to the kitchen. There's like refrigerators and stuff right there.
Now, when you went into the house, did your brothers go with you?
Yes. We all three went in at the same time.
Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happened when Mr. Jackson appeared?
He told me and Star to excuse him, that he needed to talk to Gavin for a couple minutes.
And did you see where Mr. Jackson went?
They walked into the main dining room.
You say, they. Who is that?
Gavin and Mr. Jackson.
And is that an enclosed area?
Yeah. It has a swinging door. You can close it.
So they went on the other side of the swinging door.
Yes.
And how long were Mr. Jackson and your brother gone?
About 5-10 minutes.
Now, after that, what happened?
They did the taping.
All right. When you say, they did the taping, will you tell them what you saw? Where were you?
I was standing inside the kitchen. And they were sitting down in the little sitting area right in front of the kitchen.
So you could see what was going on?
Yes.
And did you see your brother interviewed?
Yes.
Was there another part of the time that you were there where you were filmed?
Yes.
And where did that occur?
Inside the kitchen.
What was going on?
Gavin and Star were doing their little Navy marching thing. And I was standing there talking to Mr. Jackson.
Now, when the three of you went to the ranch that day, you were picked up on the limo and taken to Mr. Jackson's ranch. Did you know what the purpose of the trip was?
No.
Did you discuss it with your brothers at all?
No.
Did you know there was going to be a film that day?
I think I remember just, when we got there, we thought it was just one of his, personal tapings.
What do you mean by personal tapings?
Well, because there had been a previous video that he taped of him and Gavin and Star.
After the filming was completed, did you stay at the ranch?
Yes.
Did your brothers, to your knowledge, stay at the ranch?
Yes.
How long did the three of you stay?
Just that night.
And so you left the next day?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Jackson. Did you see Mr. Jackson after that?
After they were done with the taping, he left.
So how long, in your estimation, were you there in Mr. Jackson's house with Mr. Jackson from the time that you first walked through the door to the time that Mr. Jackson walked out? How long do you think that was?
Half an hour, 45 minutes.
Did your mom go with you?
No.
Now, at the time that you were called by Mr. Jackson, strike that. At the time you were called and you went to the ranch for the Bashir filming.
Yes.
Where were you living?
We were living at the East L apartment.
And who was living there?
Me, my mom and my brothers.
And where were you going to school?
Roosevelt.
After the time that you, let me just ask one other thing here. Are you familiar or acquainted with a person by the name of J. Jackson?
Yes.
And who, to your knowledge, is J. Jackson?
He's my stepfather.
And do you remember approximately when it was you first met Mr. Jackson, J. Jackson?
It was after the Bashir taping, I think. Yeah.
And to your knowledge, what is Mr. Jackson's profession or occupation?
He's a major in the Army.
And was he a major in the Army at the time that you first met him?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, did Mr. Jackson and your mother begin to date?
Yes.
Now, after the Bashir filming, did something unusual happen with regard to people coming around the house?
Yes.
Would you tell us what happened?
Well, a couple of British reporters came to the East LA apartment.
Do you know of your own personal knowledge? Well, were you there when they came?
Yes.
And who did they want to talk to?
They wanted to talk to Gavin.
Was your mother there when they came?
Yes.
Who else was there?
Me and my brother and Jay.
Did anybody actually do an interview with them that day?
No.
Now, where do your grandparents live?
They live in El Monte.
And in relationship, I know this is kind of, but just give us a rough estimation. How far is it from where they live in El Monte to where you lived on Soto Street in East Los Angeles?
Without any traffic, about 20-30 minutes.
Now, were you ever present at your grandparents when any reporters came?
Do you mean during that time that?
Yeah.
No.
During that time. Now, at this point in time, where the reporters came to the Soto Street apartment. Okay. What high school were you going to?
Roosevelt.
Still at Roosevelt?
Yes.
And still living in the apartment?
Yes.
Shortly after that, let me go back. Do you have a cell phone?
Right now, yes.
Did you have a cell phone then?
No.
And so if you wanted to call your mother, how did you do that?
I would call her from the payphone.
Did you have a practice or a custom of doing that?
Yeah, I would always call her probably during my lunch or right before I would get on the bus to go home, just to say hi or tell her I'm coming home, or see how the boys are doing.
Do you consider your family a close family?
Very close.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, me and my brothers especially were very close because of what we've gone through with my father and stuff.
When you meet somebody, how do you greet them?
We hug them.
Even if it's the first time?
Yes.
And you did that to me, didn't you?
Yes.
You do it to everybody.
Yes.
Who taught you to do that?
My mom did.
Your Honor, it's 11 o'clock. Is that not the right time? I'm sorry. Okay. I just want to make sure.
You sure like those breaks, don't you? Laughter.
Well, when your stomach starts growling, it's telling you something. You don't, so. Alright. Now, one of your better ones. Did you at some time talk to your mom on the phone and learn that you were going to be going on a trip?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury about that?
I called my mom, just a regular phone call, and then she said that.
Objection. Hearsay.
Sustained.
So you called your mom on the phone.
Yes.
And without telling us what was said, did your mom talk to you?
Yes.
And as a result of what your mom told you, did you do something?
Yes.
Okay. What did you do?
We went to the East L apartment and then Adrian came and picked me up.
When you went to the East LA apartment, was your mother there?
No, she wasn't.
Were your brothers there?
No.
And do you know who Adrian is?
Yes.
Who's Adrian?
He's kind of like Chris Tucker's assistant, friend.
And before you got in the car with this Adrian, did you do anything while you were at the house?
Try to gather some things. I didn't really have that many clothes there.
Why did you do that?
Because we were going on a trip.
Did you understand where you were going?
Yes.
Where?
Miami.
Okay, so you packed some clothes. And then Adrian took you where?
He took me to Chris Tucker's house.
Do you know where Chris Tucker lives?
Yes.
Or lived at that time?
Yes.
Where?
He lives off Reseda Boulevard. I don't know what city it is. All I know is the street we get off to go to his house on the freeway.
And when you got to Chris Tucker's, who was there?
My mom, my brothers, Chris, the bus driver. I don't remember.
Alright. When you arrived at Chris Tucker's, at any point in time did you leave?
Yes.
Where did you go?
We left in Chris Tucker's private bus and he took us to a jet.
Took you where?
To a private jet.
And you say, us. Could you tell us who us were?
Me, my brothers and my mom.
Alright. Was there anybody else on the bus?
Chris.
Any of his family?
No.
And do you know where? You ended up at an airport somewhere. Do you know where it was?
No, I don't remember. It was dark.
So you got into. Now, was this like a commercial airline, plane?
It was a private jet.
Alright. And who got on the plane?
Me, my brothers, and my mom and Chris.
Were there any other people on the plane?
Besides the pilot and the flight attendant, no.
So there was a flight attendant.
Yes.
Was that a male or a female?
Female.
Now, about what time is it when you finally got to the airport?
It's nighttime. Like early night.
Was it light or dark?
Dark. Starting to fade.
And you flew. How long did the flight last?
5, 6 hours.
And do you know where you were when you landed?
Miami.
Is that the first time you'd ever been in a private jet?
Well, we went to Oakland in a private jet, too, when he took us to the Oakland game.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
So that's the second time you've been in a private jet.
Yes.
On this particular occasion when you were flying with Mr. Tucker, by this time, how long had you known him?
For a while.
Had you already been to his brother's wedding?
Yes.
And you'd already been to his house?
Yes.
Did you consider him a good friend?
Yes.
Now, tell us what happened when you got to Miami.
We got off the plane. We went to Chris Tucker's room for a while. We chatted. And then we went to our room.
Do you remember the name of the place that you stayed at?
I just know it was a resort.
Was it a nice resort?
Yes.
Now, in relationship to where your room was, where was Mr. Tucker's room?
I don't know. In a totally different building.
And do you remember, in terms of the building that you were in with your room, on what floor it was?
I don't remember. I think it was the 6th floor. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
It wasn't the bottom floor.
No.
And after you visited with Mr. Tucker, you said you went back to your room. When you say, you, who was with you?
My mom, my brothers and me.
Were you all in the same room?
Yes.
Now, when you got back to your room that night, what did you do?
Went to sleep.
And then the next morning, what did you do? Do you remember what time you got up?
Early afternoon. And we got up and we went to go see Mr. Jackson.
Now, when you went to see Mr. Jackson, where did you go in that building?
1 floor up.
And where was your room in relationship to his room? I mean, it's 1 floor up, but do you?
Pretty much right on top of ours.
When you got into Mr. Jackson's room, can you describe what the room looked like?
It was very big. It had a kitchen, a living room, bedroom, a little dining room area. And then there was another room connected.
With regard to the bedroom, was there a door that led from the open area in the living room area that you described to the bedroom?
Yes.
So you could close the door?
Yes.
It isn't like a regular hotel where there's just a bed there and everyone's all in the same room with the bed.
Yeah, it's different.
Now, when you were in Mr. Jackson's room, did you meet some people there for the first time?
Yes.
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
Yes.
Now, when you first got there, were you introduced to some people, you personally? Were you introduced to some people?
Yes.
Was Mr. Jackson there when you got there?
Yes.
Did Mr. Jackson introduce you to anybody?
Yes.
Who did Mr. Jackson introduce you to?
To Dieter and Ronald.
Do you know Dieter's last name?
No.
Do you know Ronald's last name?
No.
Did he introduce you to anybody else?
2 younger kids that were there too.
Just using their first names, do you know the first names of those children?
Marie Nicole and Aldo.
Now, did you at some point meet anybody who was related to those 2 children?
Yes.
And who was that?
Frank.
And do you remember Frank's last name?
Yes.
What is it?
Tyson.
And where was it that you met Mr. Tyson?
There, but I had heard of him before.
You what?
I had never officially met him until being at the resort.
At the time that you met the people you referred to as Dieter and Ronald, was Mr. Tyson in the room at that time, or did he come in later?
I think he came in later.
And who introduced you to Mr. Tyson?
I think it was just a hi to each other and introduce ourselves. I don't remember.
Okay. Were there any other people in Mr. Jackson's room other than Mr. Jackson and the people you've just described?
When we first got there, there was the 2 nannies and the 3 kids.
Okay. Now, the 2 nannies. Did you ever learn their names?
I just know one of their names.
And who was that?
Grace.
You don't know Grace's last name.
No.
And you say, the 3 children. Are you talking about Mr. Jackson's children?
Yes.
And were they were in that room at the time you got there?
Yes.
Now, if we can just go back just a moment. Do you remember about what time it was when you first got to Mr. Jackson's room and you entered the room and were introduced to Dieter and Ronald and saw the children?
Yes.
What time was it?
Early afternoon.
So you guys slept in, huh?
Yeah.
And do you recall, what was the first thing that occurred there after the introductions?
We just sat down. I don't remember really. We just sat down or played around, like with the kids and stuff.
You played with the kids?
Yeah,
What kids?
She needs to speak up, counsel.
Prince and Paris.
Now, were your brothers with you?
Yeah, they were in the same room.
Did you at any point in time see the defendant in this case, Mr. Jackson, and your brother Gavin go back into Mr. Jackson's bedroom?
Yes.
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Stricken.
Could you tell us whether or not at some point in time on that particular day, when you were in that particular room with those particular people, that the defendant went anywhere with your brother?
Yes.
Okay. Would you tell us where?
He pulled him aside into his room.
I couldn't hear you.
He pulled him aside into his room.
Can you tell us whether or not the door was open or closed after they went into his room?
It was shut.
To your knowledge, did anybody else go in the room with them at the time that they went in the room and closed the door?
Not that I remember.
Do you recall how long they were in there?
For 15, 30 minutes. For a while. I don't know approximately time-wise.
Were there any other times while you were in the room that day that the defendant in this case, Mr. Jackson, and your brother Gavin went into that room again?
A couple of times.
So how many times in total do you think it was that your brother Gavin and Mr. Jackson went back into his bedroom?
About 2, 3 times.
And on those occasions, can you tell us whether or not, like the first time, the door was closed or open?
It was closed.
And like on the first occasion, to your knowledge, did anybody else go in there with them?
Not that I remember.
Now, how long did you stay in Mr. Jackson's suite?
All day.
Do you remember about what time it was you left?
Nighttime, when we were going to go to sleep.
So was it light or dark outside?
Dark. We don't really know, because all the windows were shut, all the curtains were closed.
But you were tired, huh?
Yeah, it had to be night.
Now, at any time on that particular day when you were in Mr. Let me just go back and make sure we lay the foundation of this correctly so everybody understands. You got there at some time in the afternoon, and you don't leave till sometime at the night.
Yes.
Correct. Did you ever leave that room?
No.
Mr. Jackson's complex there?
No.
To your knowledge, did Gavin ever leave that room?
No.
And to your knowledge, did Star ever leave that room?
No.
Now, at some time during the time that you're in Mr. Jackson's complex and the rooms that he has there, did you see your brother Gavin act in what you considered, in your opinion, to be peculiar?
Objection. Leading. Vague.
It's leading.
Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury whether or not you observed anything unusual about your brother's behavior that night?
He was just very hyper.
Describe what you mean by that.
Very talkative. Running around. Very, very playful.
Why did you consider that noteworthy?
I don't know. It was just more than usual. Like more talkative, more jumpy and stuff.
Now, on that particular evening, let me strike that. During the time that you were in Mr. Jackson's suite, did Mr. Jackson, can you tell us whether or not Mr. Jackson ever said anything with regard to any of the programs that were going to be seen on the television that night?
Yes.
All right. What did he say?
For us not to watch it.
Watch it. What's it?
The Bashir documentary.
How do you know he was talking about the Bashir documentary?
Because he said, the Bashir tape. Well, yeah.
Do you recall what his attitude was towards that at the time that he said it, or his demeanor?
Kind of like upset about it. Didn't want to see it.
At any point that night, I've talked to you about you and your brothers. At any point while you were in Mr. Jackson's room that night, did your mother leave?
No. Well, yeah, at one point she did.
Okay. When was that?
During the Bashir taping.
How do you know it was during the Bashir taping?
Because Mr. Jackson already had said for us not to watch it.
And then she left.
Yeah, she went downstairs to our room.
And what happened? When your mother left, did anybody else leave after that?
Well, they came and asked where she was. And then I told them that she was downstairs, because she had a headache. And they went down and got her.
And she came back up to the room.
Yes.
Do you remember who it was specifically who went to get her?
I think it was Frank.
Mr. Tyson.
Yes.
All right, let's show you some more photographs at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Beg your pardon.
All right, I have a series of photographs that I've shown to counsel and I'd like to be able to show them to the witness. I'll identify them by number.
All right.
I'm going to put these down here for just a second. And before I ask any questions, I'm going to move these others up here. All right, with regard to the one that's in front of you, that's people's number 48 for identification. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of that particular individual?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you just turn that over on top of that binder right there for just a second?
This.
Not that way. No, no, no. All right, there you go. Okay, the next one is people's number 43 for identification. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
And who is that? Don't tell me who it is. With regard to that, is that an accurate depiction of that individual?
Yes.
Flip that one over the other way. Flip them this way so the jury doesn't see them.
Oh.
With regard to the next one, which is people's 22, do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of that person?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And the next one is people's 21. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of that individual?
Yes.
Okay. And people's number 20 for identification, is that an accurate depiction of that particular person?
Yes.
All right, flip that one over, if you would. And do you recognize that person?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of that particular person?
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to the last one.
Judge, we need a number.
What's the number on the last one?
18. Sorry. And with regard to the next one, which is people's 17, do you recognize that person?
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction of that particular person?
Yes.
And why don't you flip them over and take them all and put them right side up, and I'm going to ask you some questions about it. Perfect. Okay, let's start with the one that has. It's probably on the bottom, but people 17. And, Your Honor, if we could have I move that those be admitted into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They're admitted.
All right, we're now, people 17. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Dieter.
And where was that person? When were you first introduced to that person?
In Mr. Jackson's hotel room.
And where, in what town?
Miami.
Okay, turn that one over, if you would. Now, with regard to the individual, I'm sorry, Gordon. All right, with regard to this particular individual that you know by the name of Dieter, okay. After you were introduced to this person Dieter, could you tell us whether or not he remained in the suite that day?
He came in and out.
And when he came in and out, did you see whether or not he had any interaction with the defendant in this case, Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
What kind of interaction?
They would go in the room and close the door.
In which room?
Mr. Jackson's room.
The same one Gavin went in.
Yes.
Do Do you remember on how many occasions that occurred?
Several. I don't know.
How many is several?
2, 3.
Okay. Now, let's go to the next one, which is I believe 18. It's probably on the bottom. There you go. Alright. Do you recognize the person in People's 18?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Ronald.
That's the person you were introduced to as Ronald.
Yes.
Now, at the time you entered the suite, did you see this person Ronald that day, and did he stay, or leave, or what?
He would go in and out also.
When you say, in and out, do you mean in and out of the
hotel room?
Do you know whether or not he ever had any interaction that day with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And what kind of interaction did he have?
He would go in the room also and close the door.
Now, when you said he would go in the room and close the door with Mr. Jackson, were there any other people that would go in and out with them?
Dieter.
So it was the three of them?
Yes.
Alright, let's go to the one that's marked as People's 20. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
And who is that?
That's Frank.
Do you know his last name?
Mr. Tyson, yes.
That's how you knew him by.
Frank, yes.
Now, with regard to this particular individual, was he in the room also during that day?
Yes.
Was he there the entire time, or did he come and go?
He would come and go also.
Did you ever see him interact with Mr. Jackson that day?
Kind of talking, but I don't remember really.
Can you tell us whether or not?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, it's hard to hear the answer.
Can you lean in and tell us again? Did he have any interaction with the defendant that day, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, they would talk, but I don't really remember.
Did Mr. Tyson go back in the room when Mr. Jackson would go in the room with this person Dieter and this person Ronald?
I don't remember if it was with them, but I think I saw him once. I don't remember.
Alright, let's go to the next one, which would be 21 for, right. Do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And what is that person's name?
Aldo.
The first name?
Aldo.
And did he have a nickname that he went by?
Yes.
What was it?
Baby Rubba. Baby Rubba.
Okay. And was this person in the suite that day?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not this particular individual left that day?
No.
He was there the whole time that you were there?
Yes.
At the time that you first met this person Aldo, do you recall what age he was?
Around Star's age. I don't remember.
Alright, let's go to the next photograph, which would be 22. Do you recognize that person?
Yes.
And who is that?
Marie Nicole.
And with regard to this particular person, was she in the suite? Did she remain in the suite after you were introduced to her?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not she left at any time before you did?
No.
And we have one left.
2 left.
2 left. Okay. And with regard to, what's the number on this one?
43.
43. With regard to 43, who is that?
That's Grace.
That's the person you knew as Grace.
Yes.
Did you know what Grace's responsibilities were for Mr. Jackson?
She was the nanny.
And by nanny, what do you mean?
She took care of the kids.
And this lady depicted in the photograph, People's 43, was in the room that day.
Yes. For a moment. Yeah.
For a moment.
They didn't stay the whole time.
And we have one last one. And the number on that is?
48.
Alright. And People's 48, who's that person?
That's my stepfather, Jay Jackson.
Alright. I think we can turn the lights back on, Your Honor. The night following, well, let me go back. Did you see any other activities on this, the day we're talking about? Okay. When you were in the suite and you got there in the afternoon and you stayed there till late at night, just so we know we're talking about the same day, did you see any other occasions where your brother Gavin would go somewhere with Mr. Jackson?
No.
So?
We stood in the suite the whole day.
Okay. Now, after that evening, you left. Where did you go? Where did you go?
Straight to my room.
And did anybody else go with you?
Well, me, my brothers and my mom.
So you all left at the same time.
Yes.
When you went back to your room that evening, did you leave the room at any time?
No.
Now, the next day when you got up, what was the first thing you did, if you recall, of significance?
Just went straight up to Mr. Jackson's room.
I'm sorry.
We just went straight up to Mr. Jackson's room.
All of you?
Yes.
Or just you?
All of us.
Now, on this particular day, did you get some kind of a treat?
This is the last day that we were there. This is the last day I got a manicure and pedicure.
And how did that come about?
Well, me and Chris Tucker and Gavin, Star, went to, the spa area.
You have to speak up.
Me and Chris Tucker and my brothers, we all went to the spa area.
Okay. And you got?
I got a manicure and pedicure, and the boys and Mr. Tucker got massages.
Now, on this particular day, after that, did you leave?
Yes.
Where did you go?
We went to the ranch. Neverland Ranch.
How did you get there?
On a private jet.
And who was on the jet?
Me, my brothers, Paris and Prince the two, Mr. Jackson, Grace, another nanny, Marie Nicole, Aldo, and I think Mr. Jackson's doctor.
And was Mr. Jackson on the plane?
Yes.
Is this a good place for a break?
I want to keep going, Judge.
We'll take our morning break.